We have titled this portion, as well as what we covered yesterday, establishing the prophetic timeline from the Reconstruction era to the present Russian America age. Establishing the prophetic timeline from the Reconstruction era to the present Russia American age. I should say Russian American age. So yesterday we began with this quote, and I included it in the notes as promised, and I'll read it now. There are two overriding, governing, dictating, dominating programs that exist at any given time within the false simulated human mind matrix. Furthermore, there are an immeasurably diverse myriad of variations and assorted versions of these dual programs, which are all running simultaneously and continuously. Furthermore, there are an immeasurably diverse myriad of variations and assorted versions of these two basic dual programs, which are all running simultaneously and continuously. As a result, no one is ever experiencing the exact same quote unquote reality within the dualistic framework of the human mind matrix. For the purposes of this particular study, we will perceive these two fundamental programs literally in terms of black and white, melanin possessive people and melanin deficient peoples. I'm going to read it again. There are two overriding, governing, dictating, dominating programs that exist at any given time within the false simulated human mind matrix. Furthermore, there are an immeasurably diverse myriad of variations and assorted versions of these basic dual programs, which are all running simultaneously and continuously. As a result, no one is ever experiencing the exact same quote reality end quote within the dualistic framework of the human mind matrix. For the purposes of this particular study, of our study, we are going to perceive these two fundamental programs literally in terms of black and white, melanin possessive people and melanin deficient people. Now, at this point, I'm going to pause and ask everyone, was what was stated, was that clear enough? Is it understood?
Kane,
Very
Kane,
good.
it was clear. Understand it perfectly.
Okay, very good. Very good. Now we're going to define, again, for the purposes of this particular study, we're going to define the word program, which we didn't do yesterday. A program is a planned series of future events, items, or performances. A program is a planned series of future events. Now, when we think in these terms, I want us to all understand that the planners of all future events are our beloved ancestors, and by extension, us. The planners of all future events are our beloved ancestors, and by extension, all of us. Look, good, bad, or indifferent. The next definition, a sheet or booklet giving details of items or performers at an event or performances. This third one, I want us to really consider as we comprehend the human mind matrix, because this is very important. Program means to provide a computer or other machine with coded instructions for automatic performance of a particular task. A program are coded instructions for the automatic performance of a particular task. So when we talk about the dualistic human mind matrix, we are talking and we define those as two dominating programs. These programs come with coded instructions that make people perform, act, or behave automatically based on that particular program. And again, we have a myriad of variations and assorted versions of these two basic programs running simultaneously. Are you all with me? The next definition,
Came.
very good. The next definition of program means to arrange according to a plan or a schedule. And most definitely, when we emanated in here, family, we had a definite plan and schedule. We are on a definite plan and on a definite schedule. And how well you understand this plan and schedule will determine the rate and quality of your rise, of your ascension. You must have a thorough understanding of this overall plan and schedule. This is why we're going to establish what? A prophetic timeline, and fit that timeline very carefully and precisely within a prophetic framework so that we know where we are at relative to this plan, relative to this schedule. This program was designed to lock us in this simulated human mind matrix for a particular period of time. And I'm letting you know we're on schedule, we're on plan. That's the only way we can talk about this. That's the only way I can teach about this. It's because we have reached a certain point within this plan, programmed schedule, framework, timeline that we can look back with clarity and see from whence we've come. And again, if we do not understand that we emanated in here as divine beings for the purposes of descent and inversion and decline and decomposition in order to fix a flaw that we manifest, then we have no understanding of our true history, of our true origins, and therefore we have no, we can get no true understanding of our ascension. So we must have a full comprehension of all of these things if we are going to ascend, if we are going to rise. And this is the whole purpose of why we are here at this particular time. We looked at this Reconstruction era. This is where we started, as being a period that began in 1873 and lasted to 1877. We observed that there were three visions of Civil War memory. Three visions, three versions, three variations of Civil War memory. All right? Relative to the Reconstruction era. The reconciliationist vision or version, which simply was rooted in coping with the death and devastation that the war had brought, just the effects and the outcomes that the war had brought, just dealing with those hands-on basic things, repairing the infrastructure, just the mechanical aspects of reconciling with the devastation, death, and destruction that the war had brought. Just the basic things. For our interests, remember, we said that these programs, we were going to render these programs in terms of two basic elements for our particular purposes, black and white. So we see these two programs relative to the Reconstruction period present during this time period. The one is the white supremacist vision or version or variation relative to the Reconstruction era, which included terror and violence. And the emancipationist vision, which sought full freedom, citizenship, and constitutional equality for the so-called African Americans, and we'll say indigenous people. So these two opposing programs that we talked about in the opening statement were present early on relative to this Reconstruction era. And we have to keep these things in the forefront of our awareness as we move forward, because they're going to be very, very, very important. And they are very important as we consider the predicament of indigenous individuals in the West who chose to emanate, to incarnate, to be born in the West. Another one of the things that we added and that we neglected to cover yesterday was, at the same time that this Reconstruction period was being initiated, the Ku Klux Klan was founded on December 24th of 1865, which was the relative result of this white supremacist vision, all right, or version or variation of Reconstruction. The white knights of the Ku Klux Klan. And later on, we're going to get into some detail about the symbolic nature of the Ku Klux Klan, the name, these symbols that they use, the alliteration of the letters KKK. All right, all of this has meaning from an energetic standpoint. We won't get into it in our review right now, but we will circle back to it. The Ku Klux Klan, KKK, is a white supremacist organization, obviously, because again, it correlates to the white supremacist vision or version or variation of the Reconstruction period. A white supremacist organization that was founded in 1866. Ex-Confederate soldiers established the KKK in Pulaski, Tennessee in 1866. They developed the first two words of the group's name from the Greek word kuklos, meaning group or band. It also means circle, family. It also means circle. Very important from a symbolic standpoint. A group or band or circle, and took the third as a variant of the word Klan. The Klan of the Reconstructionist era was not a single organization. I'm going to repeat that. The Klan of the Reconstructionist era was not a single organization. Very important that we understand this as we move forward. Or even a loose confederation of local and state groups. It was neither of these things. It was not a single organization or even a loose confederation of local and state groups. This is what they want you to believe. But follow me here. Several different Klan-like organizations with different relationships to each other coexisted in various parts of the South. Remember, I said it was two basic programs with what? A myriad of variations and assorted versions connected to each of the two programs that are running. You got to hear me. And they what? Coexist simultaneously. They coexist simultaneously in various parts of the South. They included the Knights of the Red Hand, the Pale Faces, the White Brotherhood, the Constitutional Union Guards in Texas, Nazar, the Constitutional Union Guards in Texas, the Knights of the what? Rising Sun, the Rising Sun. Very, very curious title here. And they knew what they was about. The Knights, look, the Knights of the Rising Sun. Night is opposite to morning, right? The Knights of the Rising Sun and the Knights of the White Camellia. Now we want to concentrate on this, the Knights of the White Camellia, because as we move forward in history, this is going to be very important, and it's going to correspond directly to events that are occurring right now and events that have occurred in contemporary history. The White Camellias operated with less publicity, but with perhaps even more effectiveness than did the Klansmen. Although they did not employ such violent methods, they are thought to have been even more numerous than the Klansmen, and their secrets better kept. I'm getting ready to expose them to the light of day. They were typically better organized than the Klan, and their membership, which was generally from a higher social strata, listen now, included newspaper editors, physicians, lawyers, law enforcement officials, political figures, and even former officers of the Union Army living in the region. Remember, they never, in the Reconstructionists, was an attempt to transform the 11, a so-called attempt to transform the 11 ex-Confederate states from 1863 to 1877. They never did it. Not in principle, only in appearance. Like the Klan, the Knights had an elaborate secret ceremony and ritual, and their custom included signs, grips, and passwords. The society's name was taken from the snow-white bloom of a southern flowering shrub, which of course was intended to symbolize the purity of the white race. The Knights of the White Camellias are the neoconservatives, see below, of contemporary politics. We're going to take a very close look at the neoconservatives because they are going to be central characters and central players throughout history as we trace our prophetic timeline. All right, as we trace and establish the prophetic framework that all this stuff is going to be fit in at the end of the day. So again, Jim Crow law in U.S. history refers to any of the laws that enforce racial segregation in the South between the end of construction in 1877 and the beginning of civil rights movement in the 1950s. So you see these two programs that are running simultaneously at the same time and in different variations, in assorted versions that follow our descent during this particular period of time. And understand, again, no one created these things or caused them to be initiated. The only people responsible were our beloved ancestors. They were watching over this whole process and continue to. You must understand that. You have to divorce yourself from the human emotionalism that attend and associate themselves with these particular subjects. You have to divorce yourself from it in order to see these things in their fullness, in order to observe divinity ruling and reigning at all times, our divinity ruling and reigning at all times, and to see this thing as clearly as you need to. So we talked about Martin Luther King Jr., who was programmed, like the rest of us, relative to this emancipationist vision, which sought full freedom, citizenship, and constitutional equality for so-called African Americans, or in reality, indigenous peoples of the Americas. So Martin Luther King worked as an unwitting agent to carry forward this emancipationist vision far beyond the 1960s. And we said yesterday that many of us still hold a version of this program, no matter where we are on the planet, because what attended the Reconstructionist era was the compulsory educational system and the funneling of indigenous people uh, who were in captivity into these mandatory, compulsory educational institutions. And this is where the primary programming began and continued on, because we are a product of that compulsory educational system. Did not matter. Does not matter what you call yourself now. You have to recognize that that program, in some version, in some variation, is continues to run to an extent in all of us. And Martin Luther King, you know, uh, realized that, you know, once these programs that our people were marching to, you know, programming and demonstrating for in a program fashion, he became disturbed that they were integrating into a burning house. And we talked about that to a certain extent yesterday. And we won't revisit it, only to mention it. So, right around this time, and actually soon after, 2 years after Reconstruction, the white supremacists, another version of white supremacy, was established 2 years prior to the end of Reconstruction and the beginning of Jim Crow law, which lasted from 1877, the end of Reconstruction, into the 1950s. And a so-called prophecy by Our Lady of La Salle that was recorded on September 19th, or given on September 19th of 1846, was published by this publication, this magazine or newspaper called Melanie, in 1879. Now, I want you all to look at the word Melanie. All right? What's the first lady's name currently? What's the
Isn't
first
it
lady?
Melania? Isn't
Melania.
it Melania?
Melania.
Now look, the name of this publication is Melanie, and we're looking at this in terms of what? Melanin possessive individuals and melanin deficient individuals. Can't overlook these things, family. The main statement that we excerpted from this so-called prophecy was the statement that the Antichrist would be born of a Hebrew nun, a false virgin who would communicate with the old serpent, with the old serpent, a false virgin. So I want you all to write down divine feminine, virgin, whore, Eve, and the serpent. Divine feminine, virgin, whore, WHORE, Eve, and the serpent. These are all different versions of one character, of the same characters within an allegory. The Antichrist, they claim, would be born of a Hebrew nun, a false virgin who will communicate with the old serpent. We're going to follow this throughout history. In the year 1864, Lucifer, together with a large number of demons, will be unloosed from hell. Well, we understand that, look, they were talking about and predicting the 13th Amendment of the Constitution, which formally abolished slavery in the United States, doing what? Releasing the Antichrist, Lucifer, together with a large number of demons. And it was passed in April 8th of 1864. Are you all with me? Moving forward, we took a look at the Roaring Twenties, which was the Jazz Age. We took a look at the Roaring Twenties, which they termed the Jazz Age. And we take a look at Josephine Baker performing the Charleston, who was symbolic of the Hebrew nun, Eve, the whore, the virgin, etc., and so on. The divine feminine energy. She was a central figure in initiating the Jazz Age and spreading it into Europe. She was a central figure in that. Melanin possessive. Are you all with me? She opened a portal for the proliferation of a sound and a dance in Europe. We talked about the Roaring Twenties and the spirit of the Roaring Twenties being marked by a general feeling of novelty, that is that which is new, and with modernity and a break with traditions. Jazz and dancing rose in popularity, and as such, the period is often referred to as the Jazz Age. Then we looked at one of the pioneers of jazz, a statement from Jelly Roll Morton saying that when my grandmother found out that I was playing jazz music in one of the sporting houses in the district, she told me that I had disgraced the family and forbade me from to live at the house, kicked him out. She told me that devil music would surely bring about my downfall, but I just couldn't put it behind me. There was another spirit, another energy that was coming out of our people at this time that we equate with our rise and our ascension and the destruction of the the dominating energy and spirit that is in the world, that was brought forth in the world. We equate it based on the programming, like his grandmother received, equated it as what? The devil music. Equated it as antichrist, Luciferian, demonic, devilish, satanic, etc., and so on. Well, where did his grandmother get this program? From the dominant culture, the dominant society, and the compulsory educational system. Are you all with me? Which is no different than religious indoctrination. whether she went to school or not. When the sound of jazz spread across America in the early 20th century, it left delight and controversy in its wake. The more popular it became, the more liberating and sensuous music was criticized by everyone and everything, from carmaker Henry Ford to publications of the Ladies' Home Journal and the New York Times. Yet jazz survived. Now remember, this underground aspect of the Ku Klux Klan, the white camellias, they formed the upper or higher social strata, including newspapers, magazine editors, right? Like Ladies' Home Journal and New York Times. Are you all with me? Henry Ford, representing the upper echelons, upper stratum of society, that they were already in place with a program to counter the ascension spirit that is innate in us throughout all generations and ages. They called it the devil's music. So again, the Roaring Twenties was a period in Western society and Western culture, not Eastern society and Eastern culture. Family, it began in the West and spread to the East, back across the ocean. It began in the West and spread back to the East, into Europe, and particularly Western Europe. That occurred during and around the 1920s. It was a period of sustained economic prosperity with a distinctive cultural edge in the United States and Western Europe. And we saw who and what was emblematic of that cultural edge. Later on, perhaps, we'll look at a portion of the documentary about Josephine Baker and her impact in Europe during the rise of Nazism and socialism in that country. She initially went to Berlin, and then once Hitler began to rise, you know, in Germany, she wasn't welcome there anymore, and then she went to Paris, all right, to France, and had an impact there. Carried that sound, carried that energy there as well. Particularly in major cities such as Berlin, okay, they named that first, Chicago, London, Los Angeles, New York, Paris, and Sydney. In the French Third Republic, the decade was known as Années Follies, crazy years, emphasizing the era's social, artistic, and cultural dynamism. Jazz music blossomed. And I said Josephine Baker opened that portal, there. Jazz music blossomed. The flapper redefined the modern look for British and American women, and Art Deco peaked. So we talked about these flappers, young white American Western women and European women who listened to jazz, all right? And it had an effect on their behavior. Family, it changed their program. It fundamentally changed their program. And that's what music does. It is an instrument of change to change our program. And we took a look yesterday, and we're going to look further, as well as how music in these different eras, these different generations, fomented and instituted and initiated these particular cultural changes. And it required a response almost immediately to prevent the concurrent and correlative changes that would cause the head to become the tail and the tail to become the head, that would overturn the relative age. So what was symbolized by the flapper of that time was a caricature, a symbol created by Max Fleischer, Betty Boop. And we went on to show how that although a white woman, Helen Kane, became the personification of Betty Boop, it was actually Eve, the divine feminine, a sister named Baby Esther Jones, who the caricature was based on. So again, that divine feminine energy. So we saw that the Roaring Twenties was related to novelty, modernity, a break in traditions, which ultimately would end whatever era was dominant and cause change. And we looked at modernity, which is a modern way of thinking, a modern way of perceiving, that what? Broke with old programs, old programs. So the dominant culture quite naturally viewed modernity and novelty and therefore change as a crisis. So we looked at this article by this Catholic priest, Father Stephen Freeman, an article from 2011. And the question was asked again, what do you call a Christian whose mind is so construed that belief in God is impossible? A modern man. So we know that these institutions now see modernity, change, as evil, something to be avoided, something to be opposed, something to be demonized, satanized, made devilish, called Antichrist. And in this article, he connected modernity, just like there was rise in economic prosperity that accompanied this jazz age, that economics was tied into modernity. Quoting, I occasionally make allusions to the crisis of modernity in one form or another, as in a recent post in which I made reference to Florovsky's term, the tragedy of Western Christianity. The crisis is not financial, although financial stumbles do reveal some of the cultural weakness within modernity. So he understood this relationship between modernity and economics, and that if you can affect the economic aspect of modernity, perhaps you can affect the movement, the energy of modernity. And we find out, that this was the case in 1920, that this fear, this crisis of modernity, as melanin deficient individuals term it, this was a threat because this meant the end of their dominance, the end of an age, a changeover, and of power, of dominance. And so, as a consequence, They crashed the stock market. They smashed the economic aspect of modernity, novelty, change, this break with tradition, in order to halt it, to oppose this energetic movement of our people, of melanin possessive people. They brought it to an end. So the Wall Street crash of 29 ended the era, ended the jazz era, ended the roaring 20s, which again was characterized by jazz music, dancing, modernity, novelty, and a break with traditions. And then the Great Depression ensued, which was worldwide. And we said that it began, of course, in 1929 and lasted until the late 1930s. And that it was the longest, deepest, and most widespread depression in the 20th century. So they wanted to really, end this movement energetically within our people. So then, shortly after that, we have the recovery that lasted into the 21st century, or that the recovery that lasted uh, into the 40s. Then in 1942, we have the bombing of Pearl Harbor, and which initiated our involvement within World War II, and which ushered in the atomic age, which began in 1933 and was culminated very dramatically in 1945 with the dropping of the atomic bomb, the nuclear bomb, on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And this initiated what was called the post-war economy or post-war prosperity from 1945 to 1960. During this period of time of economic recovery, America enjoyed the world's highest standard of living, and the term "the American way" began to be downloaded into the program. There's no way like the American way, and American culture began to predominate, not only um, throughout the world, but mostly this American dream and American way became adopted by the indigenous people in the West. The indigenous people in the West. And we see that there was um, a desire then to be incorporated or to be integrated into that program. And that was that we were already set up for it relative to this emancipationist program that was already being installed within us. This emancipationist vision and version and variation was already being downloaded in us by virtue of what? The compulsory educational system. So now we see this American vision and began to have the desire to be incorporated or integrated within that. The desire for full constitutional rights. Why? To be able to enjoy the American way, this higher standard of living, you know. So when we look at this as we began yesterday from an energetic standpoint, we want to understand the energy behind jazz music, the impetus behind all change, novelty, modernity, and break from traditions, from what has governed us in the past. And when we look at this from an energetic standpoint and from the standpoint of our personality, our being, the id aspect is what causes change, causes a break from tradition, causes and what desires novelty and modernity and puts us in the right now, in the here and now. The id, represented by the serpent in the biblical allegory. And that serpent, to the religious mind, to the mind of moralistic, melanated, deficient individuals, as well as individuals that are running on the emancipationist program and agenda, is deemed the devil, Satan, Antichrist, Luciferian, etc. But remember, this thing was inverted, and it is actually the id aspect which corresponds to our divinity, which corresponds to the divine power to rise and ascend. And it is the superego, morality, and the ego that keep us locked into this false, simulated human mind matrix. The id is the only component of personality that is present from birth, that represents the divinity, the energetic aspect of our divinity that we brought with us during incarnation and emanation. It is described as the dark, inaccessible part of our personality. It's not inaccessible, it's difficult to access. What little we know of it, we have learned from our study of the dream work, and of course, the construction of neurotic symptoms. And most of that is a negative character. They considered it as a negative character. Remember, when I'm reading this, I'm quoting a version from non-melanated or melanin deficient individuals. They're writing this. They cannot contact that aspect of their personality, or it's very difficult for them to, and can be described as a contrast or a counter to the ego. We approach the id with analogies. We call it chaos. Write that word down. Chaos is going to be very important. A cauldron full of seething excitations. It is filled with energy, reaching it from the instincts, not the intellect, the instincts, but has no organization, no order. It is chaotic, produces no collective will, but only a striving to bring about the satisfaction of instinctual needs. That is the need, your instinctual needs are the needs and the wants of your divinity, subject to the observance of the pleasure principle. The id is impulsive. the impulsive part of our psyche, which responds directly and immediately to the instincts, meaning animal or beast faculty of intuitive perception. And that corresponds to the subtle serpent of the Bible, Genesis 3 and 1. The personality of the newborn child is all id. The personality and the nature of the newborn child is all id. Only later does it develop the ego and the superego. Those are part of the programming, family. The ego and superego are part and parcel of the programming that begins very early on. This is why in Mark 10 and 15, the allegorical character Jesus or Yeshua, Yehoshua, whatever you want to call him, says, "Verily I say unto you, whosoever shall not receive the kingdom of God as a little child, he shall not enter therein." It's impossible. If you're ego dominant, if that program, if the programs are running that relate to the moralistic superego or the ego, you'll never make the transition into the next phase. This is why we are doing this particular study and spending so much time focusing on the actual nature of the false simulated human mind matrix, this dualism that has dominated us, that has programmed us. The id remains infantile in its function throughout a person's life. It is unchanged and does not change with time or experience. It is the purest, truest part of you, as it is not touched with the external world. It is not in touch and is not touched by the external world. The id is not affected by so-called reality, this matrix, this false illusory mind matrix, logic, or the everyday world, as it operates, they say unconscious, I'm going to say in the subconscious part of the mind. So in Genesis 3 and 6, it states, "And when the woman," which is representative of the ego, Eve, Kava, "saw that the tree was good for food, that it was pleasant to the eyes," that's the pleasure principle, "and the tree to be desired to make one wise, she took of the fruit thereof." In other words, she was affected and came under the influence of the id, which is symbolized by the serpent. Her divine nature took a hold of her, and she did eat and gave also unto her husband with her, and he did eat. So we said that the Knights of the White Camellias became what is currently known today as the neoconservatives, or of the neoconservative movement, the Knights of the White Camellia. Morphed, transmorphed, changed into the neoconservatives of today. Let's continue to trace this thing, the operation of these two programs, the interaction of these two programs that were designed to keep us locked into this false simulated human mind matrix. Neoconservatism is the contemporary, refined political institutional version of racism, white supremacy. I'll say it again. Neoconservatism is the contemporary, refined, political institutional version of racism, white supremacy. It is another version of the white supremacist variation of what? The Reconstruction era that moved through time simultaneously with the emancipationist variation, that program that is running in most of us at this time, neither of which is designed to actually liberate us, but to keep us what? Locked into this mind matrix. Follow with me now. Neoconservatism was established as a counter or offset to the rise of our id subconscious divine energy, which melanin recessive people have always viewed as antichrist, immoral, satanic, demonic, etc. Consequently, neoconservatism is the superego, actually the ego and superego writ large. It is the ego and superego writ large. Why? Quoting, the superego controls our sense of right and wrong, good, evil, morality, and guilt. It helps us fit into society by getting us to act in socially acceptable ways. Look, family, jazz music was not, from a cultural and social standpoint, socially acceptable. It broke all conventions of that, the same way as hip hop music did, the same way as rock and roll music did, the same way as soul music did, the blues, etc., and so on. The superego demands often oppose the id's demands. They're counter, they're offset. So the ego sometimes has a hard time in reconciling the two. So the ego is always caught in the middle relative to the divine demands of the id or the humanistic demands of the superego to conform with human things, culture, society, religion, tradition, ways and more ways. Mores. Are you all with me? Let's follow this now because this is very important. Neoconservatism is a U.S. phenomenon that at one level represents a historical and ideological reaction to the 60s counterculture revolution that would establish new freedoms for blacks. It's just doing what the Ku Klux Klan originally did, right? When it was established to counter the Reconstructionist amendments to the Constitution and the reconstructive, the rights and established under the Reconstruction era. Students, women's, gays, and cultural minorities. These movements involve the struggle for civil rights and the rights for members of the new social movements. Again, this move towards civil rights and constitutional equality and equity and all this kind of stuff is a program in and of itself that was never designed to cause us to rise never designed to cause to free us. It's never happened, and it never will, under the dominance of these two opposing, these two governing programs, dualistic programs. Listen, quoting again, we approach the id with analogies. We call it chaos, a cauldron full of seething excitations. It is filled with energy, reaching it from the instincts. See, jazz is instinctual. Dance is instinctual to what? Melanin possessive individuals. That is our vibrational frequency that is always with us, that is always wanting to express itself, even in non-musical ways. But it has no organization, no order. It is therefore chaotic. It produces no collective will, but only a striving to bring about the satisfaction of instinctual needs, the dictates of what? Your divine nature, which is instinctual. This is why these programs had to be implemented simultaneously and in a multitude, a multi, um, a myriad of versions and variations in order to hold down the instinctual need and desire for what? Ascension. Our ancestors understood that we had to endure a particular time period to allow complete and utter descent, decomposition, and declination relative to this alchemical process that we've all volunteered for. The satisfaction of the instinctual needs subject to the observance of the pleasure principle. The neoconservative reaction is a rollback and repeal of these rights. Same thing that the Ku Klux Klan did, but in a less violent manner. That doesn't involve, physical violence or physical terror. Issuing in a critique of liberalism and the alleged social disorder and anarchy, that's modernity. That's the chaotic nature of the id, the chaotic nature of the energetic aspect of our rise, family. This is how they view it. This is how they defined it. And so we have to recognize this in order to recognize what has attended our history, our unique history within this simulated false matrix. Issuing in a critique of liberalism and alleged social disorder and anarchy that resulted from the counterculture. That is the nature, the energetic nature of this id energy, of divine energy, is to counter culture, is to be antisocial, is to do away with these things. Thus, neoconservatives are profoundly anti-change. Anti-change. If you're taking notes, write that down. It's going to be very important as we transition into modern times. So since the id energy is profoundly chaotic in nature, neoconservatism is profoundly anti-id, just like the superego, and consequently profoundly anti-rise and anti-ascension as far as melanin possessive peoples are concerned. I'll read that again. The neoconservative reaction is to roll back and repeal, is a rollback and repeal of these rights, issuing in a critiquing of liberalism and the alleged social disorder and anarchy that they feel results from the counterculture. Thus, neoconservatives are profoundly anti-change. Again, write that word down, anti-change. Anti-change is going to correspond with anti-Christ. So since the id energy, listen, is profoundly chaotic in nature, neoconservatism is profoundly anti-id, because we said that they represent and are emblematic of the ego and superego, and consequently profoundly anti-rise, anti-ascension, as far as we as melanin possessive peoples are concerned. Moving forward, change always involves a dark night. I'm going to stop there. Change always involves a dark night. Now, night is spelled here Night, but it is also Knight from a symbolic standpoint, from an esoteric standpoint. Change always involves a dark night, Night, Knight, when everything falls apart. When everything falls apart. Yet, if this period of disillusion is used to create new meaning, then chaos ends and a new order emerges. Follow me now. All great changes are preceded by chaos. All great changes are preceded by chaos. Out of chaos, new rules are invented and new ways of thought are manufactured. All great changes are preceded by chaos, and out of chaos, new rules are invented and new ways of thought are manufactured. So for non-melanated, melanin deficient individuals, chaos is something to be avoided. Chaos is something to be avoided. It's something that is evil. It's something that is demonic. It's something that is satanic. It's something that is Luciferian and dark and black and evil. Something that needs to be countered. So consequently, when President Barack Obama used the word change in his 2008 campaign, here is a melanin possessive individual threatening to rise to the pinnacle of power in the world, and uses one word, change, as his campaign slogan. You don't even have to guess what happened. They lost their natural mind. Are you all with me? In 2008, Barack Obama used one word to characterize his presidential campaign, change. This word sent shockwaves of panic and terror throughout the ranks of the neoconservatives who had witnessed the sudden, energetic, inexplicable, an unprecedented rise of this melanin dominant son of chaos to the pinnacle of world power. In the mind of neoconservatives, the rise of Barack Obama was, of course, synonymous to and emblematic to the rise of the chaotic id energy in melanin dominant people, a phenomenon that had long been defined as antichrist, Luciferian, satanic, devilish, and demonic. Let's take a look back to Our Lady of La Salle, to her prediction or prophecy, so-called prophecy in 1846, again, that was not published until 1879, 2 years after the end of Reconstruction. And 2 years after the beginning, the consequent beginning of the Jim Crow laws that would go from 1877 all the way to 1950, that put us in the atomic age. It said that the Antichrist will be born of a Hebrew nun. What nationality was Barack Obama's mother?
European.
Uh, correct. And his nationality has always been in question, correct?
Correct.
And they question the legitimacy of his presidents, of his presidency.
All the way through.
All the way through. Again, in the year 1864, Lucifer, together with a number of demons, will be unloosed from hell. They will put an end to faith little by little, even those dedicated to God. This has been the theme, family, that has been consistent.
Dang.
With how non-melanated, melanin recessive people have viewed your ascension and rise. That you would destroy all of the traditions that they had established in the West.
And it has to be destroyed.
Relative to society, societal norms, cultural norms, religious and belief system norms that were what? Based on a God that is outside yourself, that is external to you. They will bind them in such a way that unless they are blessed with a special grace, these people will take on the spirit of the angels of hell. They'll begin to listen to their music, to dance like them, to move like them, to talk like them, to dress like them, to eat like them, to walk like them. Are you all seeing this?
Dang.
Several religious institutions will lose all faith and will lose many souls. I can document through history where that has happened following this timeline, but for the purposes of this particular study, we're not going to go into detail. But trust me, and I'll show you, I have the documentation. Let me see, where is that? Right here from encyclopedia, from the encyclopedia.com, religion from 1931 through 1939. And once we go through this, we'll circle back to this at some point and go through it, and I'll show you exactly how what they feared would happen happened. As a consequence, And almost immediately, the neoconservatives instituted an intense and unrelenting smear campaign aimed at demonizing Barack Obama, caricaturizing him as the very image of the modern day Antichrist, the portent and embodiment of everything that these melanin deficient peoples have been programmed to see, quote unquote, as satanic, devilish, demonic, dark, black, and evil. And understand, family, that this just does not end with Barack Obama. That's the way they see you as well. And the power that is innate in your melanin, that is innate in dark energy, dark matter. So we began to see these memes, these characterizations, these articles in the mainstream media, put out by the neoconservatives and supported as Obama as Hitler. And them highlighting this campaign slogan, the change we need, question mark. Heil Obama, welcome back to the 1930s. They recognize this. We have not recognized it. Our ancestors wanted us to understand and to comprehend perfectly this framework, how this thing developed from Reconstruction up to the present time. And they were calling him a socialist and comparing him with Hitler. We'll get into the Hitler character in detail a little bit later and understand from whence all this originates from. Former Republican Senator George Voinovich, now he was a senator from Ohio, which was my home state, admits that in 2008, Republicans were ordered to block everything President Obama wanted, even if it would help the country. Quote, if Obama wanted it, we Republicans had to be against it. And that was led by the neoconservative party. That was led by the neoconservative party. This is an article now that was in 2008, the beginning of his presidency. And he was reelected in 2012. And 2012, his slogan was forward, not backward, forward. Are you all with me? This is why Trump had to say, go backwards, make America great again. Now we're understanding the framework of this from and the timeline from a prophetic understanding. This article, Evangelist, Obama paving the way for the Antichrist. Now, they had called him the Antichrist, during his campaign, and even, during the inauguration and the inception of his presidency. But, nothing based on their apocalyptic predictions, based on their literal understanding of the Bible. None of that occurred. And by 2015, he was paving the way for Antichrist. They had to put that fear out there. And we know the 2016 campaign that Hillary Clinton was his likely successor. You know, just like we opened the doorway. We opened the doorway in the 60s, unbeknownst to us, with all this civil rights movement. It never helped us, but it opened the doorway for the feminist movement, for women, for white women, and homosexuals, and for gays in this country. Those are what the civil rights currently, that they have helped them far more than they have helped melanin possessive individuals. Far more. It's not even a comparison. It's not even worthy of a comparison. So they understood that Hillary Clinton would come right on in and occupy that position. So the evangelists said that they were paving the way. Obama was paving the way, even though he wasn't the Antichrist himself, paving the way for the Antichrist. A future world leader will be able to oppose God's laws. Now, in this article, they quote Franklin Graham, who is the son of who? Billy Graham. That used to be, used to fill stadiums and be on television prime time during the height of his ministry. And everybody would look at Billy Graham. Black, white, didn't matter. There is an anti-Christian bias that is now in our government. The Christian evangelist and missionary Franklin Graham said, citing Obama's views as infecting America's political and cultural systems. Christian Today reported, it has permeated our government, and Obama's to blame because he's imposing new morality, novelty, modernity on Americans that flies in the face of biblical teachings, Graham said. It's a morality that does not include God or his standards, he said. Y'all got to see this. That's what we are facing today. It is an antichrist movement that we are seeing taking place. So again, this is in 2015. And, family, this was a real discussion in mainline American politics and even in worldwide news broadcasts that this man was the Antichrist. And we see here from CNN, is Obama the Antichrist? McCain ad fuels web debate. And so this is part of this vicious and aggressive and intense smear campaign that was instituted, family, by one word and one man that said one word, and that was change, and then said another word, forward. Now, there's no political currency that we should be looking to achieve from Obama, that we should have been looking to achieve. This is where people, the majority of the people, and even our people, were fooled. They dismissed Obama. He ain't did nothing for our people. And this is the current mantra. And people were either bought into the fact that he would bring some political currency and legitimacy and meaning, to black people vis-a-vis his presidency. So this didn't happen because people weren't looking at this like we're looking at it from an energetic standpoint, from its energetic roots and its meaning energetically and symbolically. We go back again to a scripture portion that we have talked about over and over again, and we have brought to the forefront many times during our discussion of these things. And that is Ezekiel 21, 25, and 32. And this is going to sum up from a biblical perspective what we've been talking about. And thou, profane, wicked prince of Israel. Now, who is this? How have we defined, based on our study, this profane, wicked prince of Israel? What is that exactly, or who is that exactly? We should know this. The profane, wicked prince of Israel. We've gone over this several times. It is the ego and the superego. Family, the ego and the superego. Want you all to follow me. Whose day is come when iniquity shall have an end. Thus saith the Lord God, remove the diadem, take off the crown. This shall not be the same. Exalt him that is low, abase him that is high. Him that was put low and demonized, family, was the id. It was made Lucifer, the devil, Satan. Do y'all see? And it represents our divine instincts, our divine power. And the superego and the ego were made divine, royal, exalted. But now this inversion must take place. This wicked and profane prince of Israel, the ego, superego, all right? Its day has come. When iniquity shall have an end. Thus saith the Lord God, remove the diadem, take off the crown. This shall not be the same. Exalt him that is low, that is the id. Abase him that is high, ego, superego. And I will overturn it, and it shall be no more until he come whose right it is, and I will give it him. Now, this word overturn is a word that we're going to get into a little bit later in another version of this teaching as we circle back to it. But it's very interesting. And thou, son of man, prophesy and say, thus saith the Lord concerning the Ammonites and concerning their reproach. Even say thou, listen, the sword is drawn for the slaughter. It is furbished to consume because of the glittering. To consume because of the glittering. That word glittering is the word barak. It is directly related to this. His name, his first name, is directly related to this portion of prophetical scripture from Ezekiel, the 21st chapter. That's the 28th verse. The sword is drawn. For the slaughter it is furbished, to consume because of the glittering. That word glittering is barak. Let's take a look at it. And in the Strong's literal concordance, it reads that 28th, it translates that 28th verse of Ezekiel 21 in this wise. O sword, keen edged, furbished for the slaughter, to the uttermost, because of Barak. Because of Barak. Let's look at his name and decode it in the Hebrew. Now remember, he ran on change that we can believe in '08, in 2008. But it was not the political and social and cultural change, family, that everyone anticipated, even from the neoconservatives and from melanin possessive people that looked favorably and were elated because of his rise to the pinnacle of world power. Barak in Hebrew means a lightning strike. That's why they the word glittering in Hebrew, Barak means a lightning strike, a glittering sword, a sword, family, that glints in the air when you raise it to strike. This is what his name symbolized, and what he symbolized when he rose to the pinnacle of power, of world power. These neoconservatives that understand the nature of our rise organically saw this as a threat, rightly as a threat. But again, most of them just in terms of political, the political implications of this, the cultural implications, the societal implications of it. And the name Obama in Hebrew means heights, the high place. All right? It was a lightning strike, a sword strike, a glittering sword strike from a high place. Believe me, they understood this. Because on some you can go on some religious sites, Christian sites, and see this thing broken down just like this. Baraka is a Sufi term meaning the serpent. And we've already made that correlation with serpent power, with Kundalini power, with the serpent of the scriptures as being representative of the id, chaos, change, modernity, novelty, break with tradition. That power, that is our divine power. And he, in so many ways, was emblematic of that power, the rise of that power, all right, to the pinnacle of world power. Very deep meaning to this. And most of us have not recognized this as such. That's why we must put this in the a non-political framework, a non-societal cultural framework, and put it in an energetic framework relative to the overall prophetic timeline. This is what we're doing. Isaiah 14, 13, and 14. For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will ascend to the uttermost pinnacle of power. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. We're going to really get into this and decode this a little later. I will ascend above the heights. That's that word Bama. H11:16. Bama, as in Obama. Of the clouds, I will be like the Most High. We know that this is a reference to Lucifer in the scriptures. And we know what that represents from the perspective of non-melanated, melanin deficient individuals. We've established that. Luke 10 and 18, and he said unto them, I beheld Satan as lightning. That's the word Barak, H1300, H1300. The word Barak, a glittering sword fall from heaven. All right? So this association with, again, with our divine power with something that is satanic, Luciferian, demonic, evil, dark, black, etc., and so on. Now let's go to Numbers, the 21st chapter, verses 8 through 10. Follow the etymology of the usage of this term within the scriptures, of these particular terms in the scriptures. Numbers 21, 8 through 10. And the Lord said unto Moses, make thee a fiery serpent, Baraka, in Sufi. Make thee a fiery serpent and set it upon a pole. That's what happened when Barak was elected. The fiery serpent, the son of chaos, in their minds the Antichrist, rose to the pinnacle of power, was set upon a pole. Look, it was the removal, it was emblematic of the removal of the wicked prince, the ego and the superego, whose day is come, and the exalting of that which is low, the id, and the abasement of that which was high, the ego and the superego. The ego and the superego, family, seek to maintain the status quo, to prevent change, to prevent going forward, to prevent the rise, to prevent ascension, to prevent change from one age to the other. Remember, change always involves a dark night, N-I-G-H-T and K-N-I-G-H-T. Barack Obama was the dark K-N-I-G-H-T that rose to the pinnacles of power, a son of chaos, a death angel to the current structure and age and era. Change always involves a dark night when everything falls apart. Yet this is a period of disillusion. Yet this period, rather, of disillusion is used to create a new meaning. Then chaos ends and a new order begins. And again, all great changes are preceded by chaos. This is what the status quo, the protectors of status quo, black and white, melanated and non-melanated, melanin possessive and melanin recessive. This is what they fear when that program those dual programs are running in them in the different variations. Out of chaos, new rules are invented and new ways of thought are manufactured. But when that program is dominant, you don't want new rules. You want to stick to the old rules. You want to stick to the old thought patterns. You want to stick to the old traditions. You want to keep hearkening back to the past. And you will oppose modernity, novelty, breaks with traditions to the death with everything that is in you. And that is called cognitive dissonance on steroids. So, summing up what we've talked about thus far, chaos, family, equals change. It is the divine power of the id, the subconscious. That equals the power of ascension, which equals change and modernity, which equals the end of the simulated human mind matrix, which equals the end of the current age of melanin deficient people. Are you all seeing that? Chaos equals our divine power, the power of the id and the subconscious, which equals the power of our ascension, which incorporates change and modernity, which equals the end of the simulated human mind matrix, which equals the end of the current age of melanin deficient people. They know this, and they recorded this, family, in a document that was written, not originated, but presented by a man named Rudolph Joseph Lorenz Steiner. And he introduced this age of Raphael and his take on it. This was nothing more than a prophetic document of our ancient ancestors that they came in possession of, and then that they restructured to fit their program, to fit their program. So the age of Raphael, as we close, family, syncretizing the unique history of melanin possessive people within the prophetic framework, syncretizing our unique history within the prophetic framework, the age of Raphael. Joseph Steiner was an Austrian philosopher, social reformer, architect, and esotericist. Now, if he was an esotericist, that means that he was in possession, family, of the knowledge. He was a custodian of the knowledge created by our ancient ancestors that incorporated our science and incorporated a large part of our history. Steiner was born in 1861, just prior to what? Reconstruction period, and lived until 1925, family, the middle of the roaring 20s, and right before the stock market crashed in 1929. Steiner gained initial recognition at the end of the 19th century as a literary critic and published philosophical works, including The Philosophy of Freedom. The Philosophy of Freedom. At the beginning of the 20th century, he founded an esoteric spiritual movement, anthroposophy, anthroposophy, with roots in German idealist philosophy, with roots in German idealist philosophy and theosophy. Other influences included Goethean science and Rosicrucianism. From the early 23rd and late 26th century, the ruling archangel, or Raphael, the archangel of Saturn, of the Saturn sphere, the archangel Michael relinquishes some of his duties, in other words, making way for a Raphael. We're going to talk a little bit as we close about this age of Raphael. How's everybody doing so far?
Everybody's doing great.
We doing great? All right.
Yeah. I made it back for the closeout.
Absolutely. Very good. This is the part you really need to hear, because the other part, Nasi, was just a review of what we did yesterday, and we added on some other details to it.
Okay.
So this ruling archangel, or Raphael, steps aside. The archangel Michael steps aside for this ruling archangel, or Raphael, the archangel of the Saturn sphere, to begin his rule or his dominance, to initiate a new age. So in Daniel, the 12th chapter, first verse, we see this Michael, the archangel Michael, standing aside. All right. And it reads on this wise, Daniel 12:1. And at that time shall Michael, it says, stand up.
Right.
But it's the word Amad, H5975, meaning to stand still, to stop, to cease, moving or doing. All right? And we're going to see in context, it makes sense. At that time shall Michael stand still, the great prince which standeth for the children of thy people Israel. So if he's already standing, it can't mean that he stands up. The standing, in the one sense, means that he is actively standing. He is standing to move and to do. But then
Yeah.
stand still from his activity, ceases from his activity, and there shall be a time of trouble, such as never was since there was a nation, even to that same time. And at that time thy people shall be delivered. We're going to deliver ourselves. Everyone that shall be found written in the book. Everyone that will have found themselves or written themselves, Nasi, in the book.
Well, Eitai.
Yes, sir.
Again, see, the whole thing has been that everybody else, you understand, calls us to what? Not see ourselves as the book.
That's right.
So you're already written in the book because you are the book.
That's correct.
So if you acknowledge that you are the book,
right,
then you cannot put yourself in, salvation. You can't be saved.
Absolutely. So this is following right along the timeline and the framework that we have so carefully established. This spells trouble. This spells trouble. Raphael has presided over human affairs when ancient Greek civilization crashed and burned. Y'all got to hear this.
Yeah.
It's over in America. It's over in America. I'm going to show you all.
Okay.
Next, he will preside over the start of another long period of human deterioration and suffering. We had already been a part of that and shown
Yeah.
ourselves that we've been a part of that.
Yeah.
Steiner taught that the ultimate fate of good humans, particular those who heed him, will be glorious. Y'all know that that's a scam. Listen to me,
Right.
I'm a savior. But he also said there will be much trouble along the way, especially for those that don't heed him. This is the age-old BS that
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
and white people have been putting forth. You listen to me, I'm a savior. You don't listen to me, you're going to be in trouble. Raphael will assume office early in the 23rd century. Look, don't pay attention to these dates, okay? Archangels take turns overseeing human life. After Michael, which we saw in Daniel 12 and 1, the archangel of the sun, the archangel of the sun
Steps
steps
aside.
aside, or Raphael, the archangel. See, that's solar energy now. See,
Yeah, that's solar, right?
you got to make the switch from solar to cosmic. Or Raphael, the archangel of Saturn, will step in. To be a bit more precise, Raphael is the archangel of the Saturn sphere, quote, end quote. The sphere, quote, end quote, of the planet is not the planet itself, but the entire portion of the solar system bounded by Saturn's orbit. So, by presiding over the Saturn sphere, Raphael presides over the entire solar system within the orbit of Saturn. It dominates the solar system, in other words.
Yeah.
This means that, in a sense, he presides over all planets having similar orbits than Saturn's. This encompasses most of the solar system as we know it. And it is all of the solar system as Steiner described it. Steiner said Neptune and Uranus are not part of the solar system, which brings us to the 7 principal planets. The way he got that is from our ancestors, which didn't recognize 9, now see, only 7 principal planets,
Uh-huh.
which correspond to what? The 7 heavens,
Mm-hmm.
which corresponds to what? The 7 days of creation.
Yeah.
The Saturn sphere is really the last one that we enter since Uranus and Neptune do not enter our picture. But we've already determined this. We've already determined this. The ancestors have already set this framework in place for us. So, moving forward, it says the tribulations that began under Raphael will continue long after his reign ends. For centuries, the Antichrist will be promoted by those who seek to overthrow Christ. Conflict and strife will rage off and on for 6 millennia. Conflict and suffering, therefore, are inevitable. The Antichrist will even be called Christ by his followers, but all true Christians will oppose him. That are the neoconservatives. That is the Antichrist with all the strength at their command. And now see those individuals that are even melanated, that are even melanin possessive, that continue to run on this program of the emancipationist version. This is a very real battle to replace Christ by Ahriman. That's what they call him, for a remaining 6,000 years of the post-Atlantean epoch. That's very key, this post-Atlantean epoch. And Atlantis and Lemuria Mu are going to figure in to this as we follow this thing beyond this particular class. So again, the Antichrist, we looked that is us, born of a Hebrew nun, a false virgin, who communicates with this serpent energy, OB in the word Obama corresponds, family, to the word serpent. To the word serpent. So the election of Donald Trump now, that they had, when they saw Obama rising, running on change, and then running and winning on forward, the word forward, they had an answer, a trump card, if you will. The election of President Trump as white America's rash, reflexive, retributive referendum on the election of President Obama. They understood. They had to counter it, family, in real time, and had to divert that energy that caused them to change, to break with tradition, that energy that was designed to move people forward into novelty, into modernity, into a break with tradition, a break with religion, a break with the human mind matrix. They had to get people to focus backwards, not forward, not to stay in the present, to make America great again. All right? To shift this thing back to the 50s, to the 40s, to that post-era prosperity, post-war prosperity. But now see, they dug a hole for themselves that they've fallen into.
Yeah.
Watch this. The post-Atlantean epoch is the extended historical period called an epoch or great epoch in which we currently live. It began with the sinking of Atlantis, hence the name post-Atlantean. We're going to, as we move forward, we're going to visit this Atlantean Lemurian age and get into very profound depth in understanding that as we move forward. It's the very next thing that we must understand. And we'll end on or about 8000 AD. Again, ignore these dates. The post-Atlantean Great Epoch consists of 7 shorter periods called ages. 7 shorter periods called ages, family, or yomim, or cultural ages, or cultural epochs. Those are the 7 days of creation, family, in Genesis. And we've broken those down on occasion. We're going to go back and take a look and do a refresher on those as well. In the centuries since Atlantis sank, we have passed through 4 of these cultural epochs: the Indian, the Persian, the Egypto-Chaldean, and the Greco-Roman. We are now in the 5th cultural epoch, which is sometimes called the Anglo-Germanic age. Here we go. It is the non-melanated, melanin recessive age. and sometimes simply the present. The present. Come on, y'all. Ahead of us lie two more cultural epics, a sixth and a seventh, which will wrap up our culture, our current great epic, the post-Atlantean epic. The coming cultural epics are the Russian age and the American age. Walk with me, family.
Wow. That's clear there, ain't it?
It's clear.
Real clear.
The Russian age will run from 3573 AD into 5733 AD. Look, ignore those dates. They're arbitrary. They ain't in control of no dates. Like we said at
No,
the beginning, our ancestors set these programs in place, and they control the plan and the schedule. They've been controlling it all along. The transition from our current fifth cultural epoch to the Russian age, the sixth cultural epoch, will be cataclysmic. So this is why you see Trump and Putin in the headlines. This is why the Trump-Putin summit was so controversial and grabbed the attention of the world. But again, if you're just looking at this in terms of the socio-political and geopolitical ramifications, you will not see it, family. You will not see it. We are following the energetic aspects of these things so that we can be able to see this clearly and without question. America and Russia dramatically take center stage in the age of Orythiel. U.S. Presidents Donald Trump and Russian Vladimir Putin posed during the first formal summit held at the presidential palace in Helsinki, Finland. Today, that was on July 16, 2018. So we done brought this right back up to the present, family. And this is why we say we term this or titled it Establishing the Prophetic Timeline from Reconstruction to the Present Russian American Age. We done walked you right up to this present age so that we can have a perfect understanding of where we are. All right?
yes, sir.
So after the summit, you see that Russia and America were splashed all over the headlines worldwide because Trump, according to the prophetic plan, what? He bowed down to him. Just like Michael stood aside for Orythiel, America stood aside, bowed down and stood aside to Russia. Are y'all seeing this?
Okay.
They not doing this. Our ancestors are orchestrating it. They didn't write none of this.
Absolutely.
They just trying to, Rudolph Steiner is just trying to make this seem like this is something that he did. Follow me and you'll be okay throughout this age. No, no. Our ancestors determined all of this from the beginning. In an unprecedented move, the American president openly questioned his own intelligence agency to side with Russia over the claims his spies disrupted the U.S. election. All of this is tied together. Trump and Putin unite on the cover of the July Time magazine. And you see Trump's face and Putin's face and it merged into one. And it says the summit crisis. This was all planned. The fusion of the faces of the presidents of USA, Donald Trump, and Russia, Vladimir Putin, on the cover of the July issue of the magazine Time has generated reactions so enriched with the echoes of the summit held two leaders in Helsinki, Finland, and have led the American to come back again and again on his words. He had to do it, family. Now, this finally, as we close, we're going to close on this. Steiner, quote, white mankind is still on the path of absorbing spirit more deeply into its essence. Okay, if you say so. The essence, family, is melanin. And if you're non-melanated, you can't absorb nothing, especially energetic. Can they absorb solar rays deeply into their skin, family?
No.
Why? Because of the absence of melanin. So they ain't absorbing nothing spiritually. But okay, we'll take your word for it. Yellow mankind is on the path of preserving the prior period when the spirit was kept away from the body. Are y'all hearing this?
Yeah.
When the spirit was separate. Most of the people, now see, that are melanated on this planet are doing exactly that. Preserving the prior period
Yeah.
when the spirit could only be sought outside of the physical human being.
Right.
But the result will have to be that the transition from the fifth cultural epoch, that is the present, to the sixth cultural epoch cannot happen differently than as a violent fight between white mankind and colored mankind in the various areas. The world history will consist of those events that will lead to these battles between white and colored mankind until the great fight between white and colored mankind has been brought about. Family, this is why you see this purposeful attempt by President Trump to divide along color lines in this country. Most Americans agree President Trump is divisive. Do y'all think that this is by mistake,
No.
by random chance? They're reading from a script. And if not, they are programmed to do so. By whom?
Yeah.
Our ancestors.
Yeah.
They are on a mission. He's managed, quote, to deepen the country's divide along ethnic, racial, political, philosophical, educational, and geographic, that is, rural and urban lines. This is purposeful, family. They're reading from a script. They're programmed to do these things. They are in place. And set the format for our transition. This is a prediction of a race war. Steiner says that a war between whites and non-whites is a historical necessity. Evolution cannot proceed properly otherwise. Now, they want us to fight the war how? Based on technology, Nazi, that has developed since the atomic age.
Right.
But that ain't the way.
They want us to grab a gun,
Yeah.
weapon,
Okay.
and to become radicalized relative to force and physical violence. Now, this conflict indeed is coming, but the weapons of our warfare are not carnal.
That's right. That's right.
They're spiritual now, see, energetic in our nature.
Okay.
Absolutely.
This is why they've wanted to prevent our energetic rise and ascension. By what? Demonizing it, so that we would stay far away from our weapons, from our true power.
Yes, yes.
They called it satanic, and we believed it. Even the
Yes,
music, even the music that is designed to what? Incite and activate this. Our religious programming says, oh, that's secular music. That's the music of the world. That's not kingdom music.
Right.
That's not church music. And we have, for the most part, ignored the power that is inherent in these things for activating this energy that is going to aid and supercharge our ascension. So, you know, a battle is coming, but it's not going to be much of a battle.
It's a fixed fight.
Huh?
It's a fixed fight.
Yes, absolutely. Don't be misled by Steiner's use of the term yellow. In the original German, De gelbe Menschheit, Steiner didn't mean that whites will only have to fight yellow people, presumably Asians. His forecast includes all colored people, that is, melanin dominant, melanin possessive, melanated people. This is why at the beginning, family, we said that these two major, that we divided this and defined these two major overriding programs literally in terms of black and white. Melanin possessive and melanin deficient, because that's how this thing plays out prophetically. And now see, how many people are talking about melanin as being a central factor, or even have the understanding that we know about it from an energetic, that we possess now from an energetic standpoint.
not very many of us, but all of them that's in
Absolutely.
the position, of doing this research because they know.
That's
We
right.
want to know, right?
Right. So this is why the ancestors are presenting this at this particular time and putting this on view so that we comprehend this thoroughly, family, because it has implications, profound implications, as it relates to the quality and the rate and our ability to ascend and to rise and to activate these divine powers. In sum, Steiner is saying that once again, lower beings, now we know that is us, must be separated from the upward course of evolution. And again, they're not evolving. This represents their fall, but they flip this now, see, in this
Yeah,
rendition. In
yeah.
this case, the lower beings are members of lower races, and the separation will be violent. It will be a violent fight between white mankind and colored mankind. melanin possessive and melanin deficient in virtually all areas of life. Just not on the battlefield, family. Just not on the battlefield, in all areas of life. The essence of world history will consist of the forces leading to this great fight between white and colored mankind. And so we see, from one of the political, the religious blog sites of the time, you see a representation of Barack Obama and and it says preparing for World War III, Armageddon. And it has the four horsemen of the apocalypse. This is how they view this, family.
Right, right.
And here's the sad thing. Now, see, many of our people, our own people, hold this same doctrine.
Oh, absolutely.
Or
Yeah.
a version of this same doctrine within their belief systems and are
Yeah.
following this thing to their own destruction.
Yes, yes.
And so this is why we must examine ourselves, family, because we were, now see, programmed along these same lines,
Sure was.
these exact same lines. So now, again, our ancestors are putting this on view before us, not just to give us more knowledge than the next man, but for us to do a critical examination and inventory of ourselves to determine if this program is running or not, and to what extent, to what degree.
Know thyself.
Absolutely.
Eitai.
All right. Before you answer the question, we're going to end right here, family. We're going to wrap it up, and we're going to open it up for questions and comments at this time.